The rain drummed against the window like impatient fingers, matching the rhythm of my heart as I stared at the black and white image in my trembling hands. 7 weeks. That's what the technician had said before printing out the ultrasound and handing it to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. 7 weeks pregnant and completely alone. I tucked the ultrasound into my purse and pulled my thin jacket tighter around my shoulders, stepping out into the bitter January air. The medical center's automatic doors hissed shut behind me, sealing away the antiseptic smell and fluorescent lights, leaving me exposed on the sidewalk as rain pelted my face and slipped down my collar. My apartment was 15 blocks away. I couldn't afford the bus fare today, not after the copay for the ultrasound. Marco had emptied our joint account 3 weeks ago before disappearing without a trace. The bastard had taken everything, my savings, my trust, my dignity. And he'd left me with nothing but mounting bills and this tiny bean-shaped blob on grainy paper that was somehow supposed to be my future. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Mom again, probably. 3rd call today. I couldn't bear to answer, couldn't bear to hear the disappointment in her voice when I finally admitted that Marco was gone, and I was pregnant, and broke. Not today. Today I just needed to get home, get dry, and figure out what the hell I was going to do next. I was halfway home when the sleek black Bentley crawled alongside me. Even through the rain-blurred windows, I could feel eyes on me. The car moved at exactly my pace, like a predator stalking wounded prey. I walked faster, clutching my purse tighter to my side. The car accelerated slightly, keeping perfect time with my quickened steps. When it pulled ahead and stopped at the curb in front of me, my heart lodged in my throat. The rear window slid down silently, revealing nothing but shadows within. I froze, rain streaming down my face, unable to move forward or back. Get in. The voice was deep, accented, and carried the unmistakable weight of a man accustomed to being obeyed. I stammered, already backing away. Isabella Reyes. It wasn't a question. He knew my name. Get in the car. Now. My blood turned to ice. How did this stranger know my name? I glanced around desperately, but the street was deserted, everyone sensible enough to take shelter from the rain. I could run, but to where? And in my condition. Please, I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was pleading for. The door swung open, revealing a slice of warm, leather-scented interior. I couldn't see the man inside clearly, just the outline of broad shoulders, the glint of a heavy ring on a hand resting on one knee. You have something that belongs to me, he said, his voice softer now, but somehow more terrifying for it. And I believe I have something of yours as well. A fair exchange, yes? My mind raced. What could I possibly have that would interest a man who rode in a car worth more than I'd make in 10 years? Unless this had something to do with Marco. The thought hit me like a blow. What had Marco been involved in? What had he gotten me mixed up in? I don't know what you're talking about, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think you have the wrong person. A soft chuckle emanated from the shadows. The wrong person doesn't usually send me pictures of their unborn child, Miss Reyes. My hand flew to my purse where the ultrasound was tucked away. What? 1 hour ago. A rather intimate message, I must say. Oh God. The text to Marco, the one I'd sent in a moment of weakness, a last desperate attempt to reach him, to make him face what he'd done. The ultrasound photo with the caption, "This is your child. 7 weeks. I need you." But I'd sent it to Marco, hadn't I? With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and checked my sent messages. The ultrasound had gone to a number I didn't recognize, a wrong digit somewhere in my tear-blurred attempt to contact Marco. My stomach dropped as I realized my mistake. "I'm sorry," I whispered. It was meant for someone else. Yes, I gathered that much. Something shifted in the shadows, and for the first time, I caught a glimpse of his face, olive-skinned, sharp-featured, with eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the gray light of the rainy day. "The child's father, I presume?" I nodded mutely. "And where is he now? This man who has left you to walk alone in the rain?" The question held no real curiosity, only a cold assessment that made me shiver more than the freezing rain ever could. "He's gone," I said simply. Ah. A world of understanding in that single syllable. Then we have more to discuss than I initially thought. Get in, Isabella. How do you know my name? I managed to ask. A slight smile curved his lips. I know many things. Your name. Your address. The small apartment on Harlow Street with the leaking ceiling and no heat. Your job at the diner that barely covers your rent. And now, I know about your child. He leaned forward slightly, his face emerging from shadow. What I don't know is why you're still standing in the rain when I've offered you shelter. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to flee. But where would I go? Back to my freezing apartment? To my mother who'd warned me about Marco from the start? And there was something else. Something in this stranger's voice that didn't sound threatening so much as possessive. As if he'd already decided I belonged to him in some inexplicable way. Who are you? I asked, my voice barely audible over the rain. Alessio Vitale, he said, watching my face carefully for a reaction. I gave none, because the name meant nothing to me. Should it have? Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. You truly don't know who I am, do you? I shook my head. Interesting. He gestured to the open door. Come. I promise no harm will come to you or your child. Not while you're under my protection. Your protection? I repeated, confusion mingling with fear. I don't need... Everyone needs protection, Isabella. Especially those who don't realize they're in danger. A chill that had nothing to do with the rain ran down my spine. Are you threatening me? If I were threatening you, he said softly, you would not need to ask. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time I glanced at the screen. An unknown number, but the text was clear enough. You've been sleeping with a dead man, Isabella. Marco stole from me. Now you'll pay his debt. I looked up sharply, but Alessio's expression revealed nothing. Another message came through. Get in the car, or the next photo I send will be of Marco's body. My legs nearly gave out beneath me. Was this man, this Alessio Vitale, responsible for Marco's disappearance? Had he killed him, or was this all an elaborate bluff? Time is a luxury you don't have right now, Alessio said quietly. There are others looking for you, others who won't be as gentle as I intend to be. As if to punctuate his words, a dark SUV turned the corner at the far end of the street, moving slowly, deliberately. Last chance, Isabella. Alessio extended his hand, large, strong, adorned with that heavy gold ring bearing some kind of crest. Choose. I looked at the approaching SUV, then back at Alessio's outstretched hand, the devil I didn't know versus the devils rapidly approaching, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a small, treacherous voice whispered, he knows about the baby. He offered protection. What choice do you really have? I placed my trembling hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and dry and impossibly strong. Wise choice, he murmured, pulling me into the car with surprising gentleness. The door closed behind me with a soft, expensive thud, sealing me into a cocoon of warm leather and sandalwood cologne. As the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of the SUV accelerating. Who are they? I asked, watching the SUV grow smaller in the rear window. People who believe that debts can be paid in blood, Alessio said simply. He sat across from me, one arm stretched along the back of the seat, studying me with those impenetrable dark eyes. You're Marco. He took something very valuable from some very dangerous people. And you? I whispered. Are you one of those dangerous people? His smile was slow, predatory, utterly without warmth. I'm much worse, Isabella. I'm the man they answer to. As the realization of what that meant washed over me, as I understood exactly whose car I had just entered, my phone buzzed one final time. The message contained just 3 words, you're mine now. I looked up to find Alessio watching me, his expression unreadable. He hadn't touched his phone. This message had come from someone else. Someone who knew I was with him. Someone who was watching. Where are you taking me? I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain calm. Somewhere safe, he replied. Somewhere no one will find you until I decide what to do with you and that child you carry. The car accelerated, carrying me away from everything I'd ever known and into the arms of a man who collected debts in blood. And all because of one misdirected text. The Bentley glided through the rain-slicked streets, turning away from my neighborhood and toward the wealthy district I rarely had reason to visit. Alessio hadn't spoken since his ominous declaration, content to watch me with those unnervingly calm eyes, while I clutched my purse to my chest like a shield. When the car phone rang, he answered with a single word. Yes. A rapid stream of Italian followed from the other end, too fast for me to catch any words with my high school language classes from years ago. Whatever the caller said made Alessio's expression harden, the muscle in his jaw tightening visibly. Change of plans, he said, his accent thickening with what I sensed was controlled anger. Prepare the helicopter. We leave in 20 minutes. Helicopter? My stomach lurched with something beyond morning sickness. Where was he planning to take me? Please, I said, hating the tremor in my voice. I don't understand any of this. What did Marco take from you? Whatever it is, I don't have it. Alessio's gaze sharpened. You truly don't know? I shook my head, fighting back tears of frustration. I haven't seen Marco in 3 weeks. He cleared out our bank account and disappeared. That's all I know. And yet you still try to contact him. Heat crept into my cheeks. He's the father of my child, a child he clearly has no interest in. Alessio observed coldly. The truth of his words stung, but I lifted my chin. That's between Marco and me. No, Isabella, not anymore. He leaned forward, close enough that I could smell the subtle notes of his cologne, something expensive and complex that made my head swim. Marco Delgado stole $2 million from my organization. Money that was meant to complete a very important transaction. The air left my lungs in a rush. $2 million. That's impossible. Marco was a bartender, among other things. Alessio's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your lover had many talents. Theft, deception. He was particularly skilled at making women believe in him. I don't believe you, I whispered. But even as the words left my mouth, doubt crept in. Marco's unexplained absences. The cash he sometimes brought home, the late-night phone calls he took in the bathroom with the shower running. You see it now, don't you? Alessio said softly. The signs were there all along. The car slowed, turning through an ornate gate into a private drive. Through the rain-streaked windows, I caught glimpses of manicured grounds surrounding a modern mansion of glass and stone. Security cameras tracked our approach, and men in dark suits appeared as the car stopped under a covered entrance. We have very little time, Alessio said, checking his watch. A sleek timepiece that probably cost more than my yearly rent. My enemies have discovered my interest in you. That makes you a target. Your enemies? I repeated numbly. The men in the SUV. They work for the Moretti family. They believe that because Marco stole from me while working under their protection, they're entitled to claim you as compensation. My blood ran cold. Claim me? I'm not property to be claimed. In their world? In my world. Everything has a price. His eyes moved deliberately to my still flat stomach. Everyone. One of the suited men opened Alessio's door, speaking rapidly in Italian. Alessio responded with a sharp command before turning back to me. Come, quickly. When I hesitated, he reached across and grasped my wrist. Not roughly, but with unmistakable authority. Isabella, I can protect you and your child, but only if you cooperate. The choice is yours, but understand this. If you walk away now, you won't make it to the end of the driveway. I looked past him to where another dark SUV had pulled up at the gate. Even from this distance, I could see men with guns emerging from the vehicle. Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. Why would you protect me? I'm nothing to you. Something flickered in Alessio's eyes. An emotion I couldn't name. You sent me a picture of your unborn child, he said, as if that explained everything. In my world, that creates a certain responsibility. Before I could question this cryptic statement, he pulled me from the car and into the shelter of his body. He was tall, taller than I'd realized in the confines of the Bentley, and moved with the fluid grace of a predator, guiding me through the mansion's towering entryway and into a sunken living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the stormy bay. Gather only what's necessary, he instructed a slim woman in a tailored suit who appeared silently at his side. We leave in 10 minutes. Yes, sir, she replied, then disappeared as quickly as she'd come. Where are you taking me? I demanded, finally finding my voice. My island, Alessio replied, crossing to a bar of gleaming marble and pouring himself a measure of amber liquid. It's the only place I can guarantee your safety right now. Your island, I repeated flatly. Of course, because you have an island. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Several, actually. A distant popping sound drew his attention to the windows. Even I recognized the sound of gunfire. They're testing my perimeter security, he said with clinical detachment. He drained his glass in one smooth swallow. Sooner than I expected. Maria. The woman in the suit reappeared instantly. Sir? We move now. Is the doctor aboard? Yes, sir. Everything is prepared. Doctor? My hand instinctively went to my stomach. I don't need a doctor. Alessio's gaze followed my movement. The doctor is for your prenatal care, nothing more. I want to ensure the child is healthy. Why do you care about my baby? The question burst from me, fueled by fear and confusion. Because Marco doesn't, he answered simply, and that makes it my responsibility. More gunfire sounded, closer now. Alessio moved toward me with fluid grace, taking my elbow. Time to go, Isabella. He led me through the house at a brisk pace, flanked by 2 bodyguards who appeared from seemingly nowhere. We emerged onto a rooftop helipad where a sleek black helicopter waited, its rotors already spinning, creating a wind that whipped my hair across my face and plastered my damp clothes to my skin. I balked at the sight. I can't. Alessio didn't give me time to finish the protest. He swept me into his arms as if I weighed nothing and carried me to the helicopter. I should have fought, should have screamed, but the sudden proximity to his body, the solid warmth of him, the scent of his skin, left me momentarily stunned. He deposited me gently on a leather seat inside the luxurious cabin and fastened my safety belt himself, his fingers brushing against my hip in a touch that felt too intimate. Trust me, Isabella, he said, his face close to mine, his breath warm against my cheek. I won't let anything happen to you or the child. I found my voice at last. Why should I trust you? I don't even know you. But I'm beginning to know you, he replied, settling into the seat beside me. And I protect what's mine. Before I could process the possessive claim in those words, the helicopter lifted off. Through the window, I saw muzzle flashes from the trees surrounding the property, men with guns firing upward as we rose into the stormy sky. They're shooting at us, I gasped, instinctively curling forward to protect my stomach. Alessio's hand came to rest on the back of my neck, a steadying touch that sent an inappropriate shiver down my spine despite my terror. This helicopter is bulletproof, he said calmly, and those men are already dead. As if to confirm his words, I saw his security team emerging from the house, automatic weapons raised. I turned away before I could witness what happened next. How deep was Marco involved with you? I asked, needing to fill the silence with something other than the implications of Alessio's casual reference to death. He worked for the Moretti family, not directly for me, Alessio replied, his thumb moving in small circles at the base of my skull. I should have pulled away from the intimate gesture, but the gentle pressure was somehow calming my frayed nerves. He was their accountant, of sorts. Handled certain financial transactions. Money laundering, I translated flatly. Alessio inclined his head, neither confirming nor denying. And he stole from you. He diverted funds meant for a shipment I was expecting. Without those funds, the shipment was seized, the merchandise lost. His expression darkened. The men responsible for the shipment were also lost. I swallowed hard, understanding the euphemism all too well. Did you kill him, Marco? Not yet. His eyes met mine, fathomless and cold. But I will find him, Isabella. And when I do, his fate depends largely on you. On me? I don't have your money. No, but you have something far more valuable to me now. His gaze dropped to my stomach again, and something possessive and hungry flashed in his eyes. You carry the child of a man who betrayed me. In the old ways, that child would be mine by right, to raise as my own, or to eliminate as I saw fit. My blood froze. You wouldn't hurt a baby. No, he agreed, his voice softening. I wouldn't, which leaves only one option, doesn't it? The implication hung in the air between us as the helicopter banked over the turbulent gray waters of the bay. In the distance, I could see an island emerging from the mist, a rugged landmass dominated by a sprawling stone structure that looked more like a fortress than a home. That can't be legal, I whispered. You can't just claim someone else's child. Legal. Alessio actually laughed, a sound so unexpected it startled me. Isabella, I think you're beginning to understand very little of what I do operates within the bounds of conventional law. The helicopter began its descent toward a pad adjacent to the fortress. What about what I want? I asked, desperation edging into my voice. Don't I have any say in this? Alessio studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Of course you do. You have choices, Isabella. They're simply limited by the reality of your situation, which is that you're carrying a child whose father has disappeared after stealing from one of the most dangerous men in the country, that there are people who would harm you and that child to get to me, and that I am now the only thing standing between you and those people. His hand moved from my neck to cup my cheek, the gesture almost tender. So yes, you have choices, but only one if you want to live. The helicopter touched down with barely a shudder. Through the windows, I could see more men in suits approaching, and a silver-haired man in a white coat, carrying a medical bag. Your first choice, Alessio said, his voice low and intense, is whether you'll allow my doctor to examine you and the child to ensure you're both healthy after the stress of today. I hesitated, then nodded. Whatever his motives, prenatal care was something I desperately needed and couldn't afford. Good. His approval shouldn't have warmed me, but it did. Your second choice will come later, after you've rested. For now, welcome to Via Vitale, Isabella, your new home. As the helicopter door opened and the wind rushed in, carrying the scent of the sea and something wild and ancient from the island itself, I realized I had stepped across a threshold I could never return from. All because of one misdirected message, a digital mistake that had delivered me directly into the hands of a man who collected debts in blood, and now, apparently, in children. The doctor, Dr. Rossi, as Alessio introduced him, was professionally detached as he examined me in a room that looked more like a luxury spa than a medical facility. He confirmed what I already knew. I was 7 weeks pregnant, the baby appeared healthy, and I was severely anemic and underweight. She needs rest, proper nutrition and supplements, he told Alessio in accented English, speaking about me as if I weren't present. The first trimester is critical. No stress. Alessio's laugh was short and humorless. Circumstances make that last part difficult, doctor. Then change the circumstances, Dr. Rossi replied, snapping his bag shut. Or risk losing the child. Something dark flickered across Alessio's face, a flash of emotion so raw it startled me. For a moment, I glimpsed something beneath his controlled exterior, something wounded and dangerous. Leave us, he commanded, and the doctor departed without another word. When we were alone, Alessio approached the examination table where I still sat, draped in a silk robe someone had provided to replace my damp clothes. You haven't been taking care of yourself, he said, his voice low with disapproval. I bristled at his tone. I've been a little preoccupied with suddenly being broke and pregnant and alone. You're not alone now. He moved closer, his presence filling the room, making it difficult to breathe. And you'll never worry about money again. At what cost? I whispered. That depends on you. He reached out, his fingers hovering near my cheek without quite touching me. Cooperate, and you'll find I can be generous. Defy me, and... He let the threat hang unfinished in the air between us. I need to rest, I said, pulling the robe tighter around me. The doctor said, yes, of course. He stepped back, his expression smoothing into polite concern. Maria will show you to your quarters. Dinner will be at 8. I expect you to join me. It wasn't a request. Maria, the same efficient woman from the mainland house, led me through stone corridors that felt centuries old, though they were fitted with state-of-the-art security cameras at regular intervals. We climbed a sweeping staircase to the east wing, where she unlocked an ornate wooden door and gestured me inside. "Your suite, Miss Reyes. Mr. Vitale had it prepared for you." The suite was larger than my entire apartment, with a canopied bed that could have slept four, a sitting area with a fireplace already crackling with warmth, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a turbulent sea. A bathroom of gleaming marble featured a sunken tub big enough to swim in. In a connected dressing room, I found closets filled with clothing, all in my size, all with designer labels I'd only seen in magazines. "How did he—" I began, fingering the sleeve of a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Mr. Vitale is thorough," Maria replied simply. "There's a panic button by the bed if you need anything. Dinner is at 8 sharp. Mr. Vitale does not tolerate lateness." With that, she left, and I heard the soft but unmistakable click of a lock engaging. I was a prisoner in a gilded cage. I spent the next hours exploring my luxurious prison, searching for weaknesses, escape routes, anything that might give me an advantage. The windows were bulletproof and didn't open. The door was solid oak reinforced with steel. The panic button by the bed seemed to be the only way to communicate with the outside world. At precisely 7:45, Maria returned to escort me to dinner. I'd selected the plainest outfit I could find from the obscenely expensive wardrobe, black trousers and a simple blue blouse. But even these bore labels I recognized from fashion magazines. "Mr. Vitale prefers dresses for dinner," Maria observed with a disapproving glance at my ensemble. "Mr. Vitale doesn't dictate my wardrobe," I replied, lifting my chin. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "As you wish." She led me down to a formal dining room dominated by a table that could have seated 20, though only 2 places were set, one at the head and one to the right. Candles flickered in silver holders, casting dancing shadows on stone walls, hung with paintings I suspected were priceless originals. Alessio was already there, standing by a window with a glass of wine, looking out at the storm that still raged across the island. He'd changed into a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders like it had been poured onto him, making him look even more imposing than before. He turned as we entered, his eyes moving over me in a slow, deliberate appraisal that made my skin prickle with awareness. "I see you're making yourself comfortable," he said, nodding to Maria, who withdrew silently, closing the heavy doors behind her. "As comfortable as one can be as a prisoner," I replied. "Guest," he corrected, moving to pull out my chair. "A highly valued one." I sat, if only because my legs felt suddenly unsteady beneath that penetrating gaze. "A guest who can't leave, for your own protection." He took his seat at the head of the table, close enough that I could smell his cologne, that same intoxicating blend of sandalwood and something darker that made my pulse quicken despite my fear. Servants appeared with the first course, some kind of delicate seafood dish I couldn't identify. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until the aroma hit me, and I had to force myself not to fall on the food like a starving animal. "Eat," Alessio said, watching me with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. "The doctor said you're undernourished." I took a bite, unable to suppress a small sound of pleasure as the flavors exploded on my tongue. Alessio's eyes darkened at the sound, his fingers tightening almost imperceptibly around his wine glass. "Tell me about Marco," he said after I'd eaten several bites. "How did you meet?" I set down my fork, suddenly wary. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I need to understand what kind of man would abandon his child." His tone was conversational, but I sensed the dangerous undercurrent. "And what kind of woman would still try to contact him afterward?" Anger flared in my chest. "You don't know anything about me." "I know more than you think," Isabella Marie Reyes, 26 years old, born in Chicago to Maria Reyes, father unknown. Graduated with honors from state, but couldn't afford to continue to your master's degree in education. Worked 3 jobs to support yourself and help your mother with her medical bills until she passed 2 years ago. His recitation of my life was clinical, detached. "You met Marco Delgado 9 months ago when he started bartending at the restaurant where you wait tables. Moved in with him after just 2 months. A reckless decision, wouldn't you say?" The intimate details of my life laid bare like this made me feel violated, exposed. "Have you been stalking me?" "I've been researching you," he corrected. "A necessary precaution, given the circumstances. You mean given that I accidentally texted you an ultrasound picture? I shook my head in disbelief. Most people would have just ignored it, or replied wrong number. I'm not most people, Isabella. Clearly, I muttered, taking a sip of water. To answer your question, I met Marco at work. He was charming, attentive, made me feel special. The admission tasted bitter now. I thought he loved me. Love, Alessio repeated, as if testing an unfamiliar concept. And do you still love him, this man who abandoned you and his child? I stared down at my plate, the question piercing something tender and unhealed inside me. I don't know what I feel anymore. You texted him the ultrasound, Alessio pointed out. That suggests some lingering attachment. I wanted him to know, I said quietly. To feel something. Guilt, shame, anything. I wanted him to hurt like I'm hurting. Alessio's expression softened fractionally. Revenge. That I understand. The rest of the meal passed in strange, almost companionable silence. The food was exquisite, each course more tempting than the last, but I couldn't fully enjoy it with Alessio's eyes on me, watching every bite, every swallow, every flicker of expression on my face. After dessert, a chocolate confection that made me momentarily forget my circumstances, he led me to a library where a fire crackled in a massive stone hearth. Rain lashed against leaded glass windows, and lightning occasionally illuminated the tumultuous sea beyond. You mentioned choices, I said, as he poured brandy into crystal snifters. What exactly are my options here? He handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine in a touch that felt deliberate. Sit, Isabella. I perched on the edge of a leather armchair, watching as he took the seat opposite, stretching his long legs toward the fire. Your first option, he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, is to remain here under my protection until the child is born. Afterward, you would be generously compensated and free to go wherever you wish. My hand went instinctively to my stomach. And the baby? Would remain with me. His eyes met mine, unflinching. To be raised as my heir, the room seemed to tilt around me. You want to take my child? I want to give your child everything. Security, education, a legacy. Things you cannot provide. His voice was gentle but implacable. The child of a man who betrayed me, raised to be loyal to me instead. There's a certain poetry in it, don't you think? It's monstrous, I whispered. It's practical, he countered. The child would want for nothing, and you would be free to start a new life, with wealth most people only dream of. What's the second option? I asked, already dreading the answer. Alessio leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes intense in the firelight. You stay, not just until the birth, but afterward. You raise the child here, under my roof, under my protection. You become part of my household, part of my... He hesitated, searching for the right word. Family. I stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. You want me to live here? With you? As what? Your prisoner, your servant. As the mother of my heir, he said simply. You would have status, respect, everything money can buy. The child would have both parents, one biological, one adopted. You're not offering to adopt my baby, I said slowly. You're offering to adopt me. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. You understand quickly, Isabella. That's good. Why? I demanded. Why would you want this? You don't know me. You don't... I broke off, a terrible suspicion forming. Is this some kind of twisted revenge against Marco? Taking his woman and his child? Alessio's expression hardened. Marco forfeited any claim to either of you when he stole from me and abandoned you. This isn't about him. Not anymore. Then what is it about? He rose from his chair in one fluid movement and crossed to where I sat, looming over me, his presence overwhelming in the firelit room. Perhaps I simply want what he was foolish enough to throw away. My breath caught as he reached down to brush a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering against my cheek. You can't just acquire people. Can't I? His smile was dangerous, predatory. Look around you, Isabella. What do you see? Everything in this room. Every painting, every book, every piece of furniture. I wanted it, So I acquired it. When I see something of value, something rare and beautiful, I collect it. I'm not a thing to be collected, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. No, he agreed, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. You're far more valuable than any object. You're the future mother of my heir. I jerked away from his touch, standing so abruptly that my brandy sloshed over the rim of the glass. The baby isn't yours. It will be, he said with absolute certainty, one way or another. Before I could respond, the library door burst open. Maria stood there, her usual composure shattered, her face pale. "Sir," she said, her voice tight with tension, "we have a situation. The perimeter alarms on the north side." Alessio was instantly alert, all trace of the seductive predator gone, replaced by something colder, more dangerous. How many? At least 6 boats. They've already landed. She glanced at me, then back to him. Moretti's men. How? Alessio demanded, already moving toward a panel on the wall that slid back to reveal an array of weapons. The storm should have made approach impossible. They had inside help, Maria said grimly. Gabriele is dead. They used his access codes. Alessio swore in Italian, selecting a handgun and checking it with practiced efficiency. Evacuate to the panic room. Take her. He nodded toward me. No, Maria said. And for the first time I heard fear in her voice. The route is compromised. They're already inside the lower levels. Alessio's expression turned to granite. Then we go to the helipad. He crossed to me in 2 long strides, taking my arm in a grip that was firm but not painful. Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. Understood? I nodded, too terrified to speak. Good. He pulled me against his side, his arm around my waist almost protective. Because I will not lose you or that child to Moretti, not when I've just found you. The possessive declaration should have repulsed me. But as gunshots echoed from somewhere below us, and the smell of smoke began to seep under the door, I found myself clinging to Alessio, my face pressed against the solid warmth of his chest. I'm scared, I whispered, hating the weakness but unable to pretend otherwise. His hand came up to cradle the back of my head, the gesture unexpectedly tender. I know, Kara, but I will get you out of here, I promise. He tilted my face up to his eyes burning with an intensity that stole my breath. No one takes what's mine. No one. As alarms began to blare throughout the fortress and the sound of gunfire drew closer, I realized I had moved from one kind of danger into something far worse. Not just the physical threat of Moretti's men, but the emotional danger of starting to believe Alessio's possessive promises of protection, of beginning to see this dangerous man as my sanctuary rather than my captor. And as he led me from the library toward an uncertain escape, his body shielding mine, his gun ready in his free hand, I couldn't tell which terrified me more. The men coming to kill us, or the fact that I was already starting to trust the devil who had claimed me and my unborn child as his own. Alessio moved through the fortress with lethal precision, guiding me through corridors and hidden passages I never would have found on my own. Twice we encountered men in black tactical gear. Moretti's soldiers, I assumed, and twice Alessio fired his weapon with deadly accuracy before I could even process what was happening. Don't look, he murmured each time, turning my face into his shoulder as we stepped over the bodies. But I'd already seen enough to know I was witnessing a side of him that confirmed every fear. Alessio Vitale was a killer, capable of taking lives without hesitation or remorse. Yet those same hands that dealt death so efficiently held me with surprising gentleness. His body constantly positioned between me and danger. The contradiction made my head spin. Or perhaps that was the smoke now filling the corridors, acrid and thick. They've set fires to flush us out, Alessio explained, his voice tight with controlled rage. Destroying priceless art and centuries of history for a vendetta. We reached a narrow spiral staircase, hidden behind a tapestry that Alessio activated with a hidden switch. This leads to the North Tower. The secondary helipad is there. As we climbed, the sounds of fighting echoed throughout the stone fortress. Gunshots, shouted commands in Italian, the distant wail of what might have been a wounded man. I tried not to think about the people dying below us, Alessio's staff and security, People like Maria who had shown me only courtesy. "What about your people?" I asked, breathless from the climb and from fear. "They knew the risks when they entered my service." Alessio replied, his voice hard. "Their families will be compensated." The cold calculation in his tone chilled me. This was a man who measured everything in terms of debts and payments, even human lives. We emerged onto a small landing near the top of the tower. Rain lashed through narrow windows, soaking us as Alessio keyed a code into a metal door. It swung open to reveal a rooftop helipad, but no helicopter. "Where is it?" I gasped, rain plastering my hair to my face, the wind nearly knocking me off my feet. Alessio's expression was thunderous as he pulled me back inside, slamming the door. "They've either destroyed it, or the pilot betrayed us. What do we do now?" I had to shout over a sudden explosion that rocked the fortress, sending dust and small stones raining down from the ceiling. "We have one option left." Alessio checked his weapon, then reached inside his jacket and withdrew a second, smaller gun. "Take this." I stared at the pistol he was offering, my hands refusing to move. "I can't, I've never—" "It's already loaded. Safety's off. Point and pull the trigger." When I still hesitated, his voice softened. "Isabella, I hope you won't need it. But if something happens to me, you'll need to protect yourself and the child." Trembling, I took the gun. It was heavier than I expected, cold and deadly in my inexperienced hand. "Good. Now stay close." He pulled me back toward the spiral staircase, but instead of descending, he continued upward, to the very top of the tower, where another, smaller door awaited. This one he unlocked with an actual key from his pocket. Beyond it lay a small circular room with windows on all sides, offering a panoramic view of the island and the churning sea beyond. The room was spartanly furnished. Just a communications console, a small cot, and what looked like emergency supplies. "Observation post," Alessio explained, moving immediately to the console and punching in a series of codes. "And our last resort." A static-filled voice responded in Italian. Alessio replied rapidly, his tone commanding. Whatever he said must have worked, because relief flashed briefly across his face before his mask of control returned. "Help is coming," he told me, moving to the windows to scan the grounds below. "But we have to hold this position for 20 minutes. I joined him, following his gaze to where armed men were swarming the courtyard, surrounding the main entrance to the tower. Flames licked at the windows of the east wing, where my suite had been. The beautiful fortress was being systematically destroyed. "Who are they?" I asked, watching one man direct the others with sharp hand gestures. "Why do they hate you so much?" "The Moretti family has been rivals with the Vitalis for generations," Alessio said, his eyes never leaving the scene below. "But this isn't just about old blood feuds. This is business. When Marco stole my money and the shipment was seized, the Morettis lost face. Their territory was encroached upon by smaller organizations who sensed weakness. Antonio Moretti, the man down there, lost his eldest son in the resulting conflict. I swallowed hard. And he blames you. With some justification, Alessio admitted. I should have verified Marco's loyalty more thoroughly before entrusting him with such a significant transaction. The casual acknowledgement that he shared responsibility for deaths and destruction was somehow more disturbing than if he'd denied all culpability. And now? Now Antonio wants blood. Mine, specifically. Alessio's gaze shifted to me, to my stomach, and anything else I might value. The implication was clear. If Moretti's men found me, my death would be a means to hurt Alessio. My baby's death would be a bonus. A bullet shattered one of the windows, sending glass spraying across the room. Alessio shoved me down behind the console, covering my body with his as more shots followed. "They've spotted us," he said grimly. "And they have a sniper." Another shot, another window destroyed. Rain and wind whipped into the room, soaking us as we huddled behind the inadequate shelter of the metal console. 18 minutes, Alessio muttered, checking his watch. "We need to hold them off for 18 minutes. "Then what?" I asked, my teeth chattering from cold and fear. "Then we either escape or die trying." He met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw something like regret in his gaze. "I'm sorry, Isabella. I never intended to draw you into this war." "You kidnapped me!" I reminded him, anger momentarily overriding fear. I protected you, he corrected. If I'd left you on that street, Moretti's men would have found you within hours. What they would have done to you, he broke off, his jaw tightening. Death would have been a mercy. Before I could respond, the door to the observation room burst open. Alessio fired in one fluid motion, dropping the first man through, but a second followed immediately, firing wildly. I screamed as Alessio shoved me roughly aside, taking a bullet in his shoulder that had been meant for me. Despite the injury, he returned fire with deadly precision, and the second attacker fell. Alessio! I crawled to where he had slumped against the wall, blood darkening his expensive suit. You're hurt. It's nothing, he growled, though his face had gone pale beneath his olive complexion. Just a graze. It was clearly more than a graze, but I didn't argue. Instead, I tore a strip from the bottom of my blouse and pressed it against the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. Why did you do that? I demanded, fear making my voice sharp. Why take a bullet for me? His eyes met mine, dark with pain, but also with something else, something possessive and determined. Because you carry the future, Isabella. My future. The baby, I whispered, understanding at last. That's all this has ever been about. You want my child. Not just the child, Alessio said, his blood-stained hand coming up to cup my cheek. You. Both of you. Confusion washed over me. But why? You said yourself, Marco betrayed you. This baby is his. Why would you want— Because I know what it is to be born unwanted, he interrupted, his voice raw with an emotion I couldn't name. To be the son of a man who saw you only as a debt to be paid. My mother was like you, young, beautiful, caught in a world she didn't understand. My father took her as payment when her brother couldn't repay a loan. She died giving birth to me, and he never let me forget that my life came at the cost of hers. The revelation stunned me into silence. This glimpse into Alessio's past, into the wounds that had shaped the dangerous man he'd become, shifted something in my perception of him. I won't let that happen to your child, he continued, his eyes burning with intensity despite the pain. I won't let it be raised as a debt, as a thing, as something less than cherished. So, instead, you'd take it from its mother? I challenged, though my voice lacked conviction. No, he said softly. I'd give it both of us, a mother who carried it in her body, and a father who chose it, who wanted it, who would burn the world to protect it. The raw sincerity in his voice made my heart constrict painfully in my chest. Before I could respond, more gunfire erupted from the stairwell. They're coming, Alessio said, struggling to rise. How many bullets do you have left? I checked the gun he'd given me, which I'd tucked into the waistband of my trousers. I don't know. I haven't fired any. 6 then. He grimaced as he tore the makeshift bandage from his shoulder and replaced it with a fresh strip torn from his own shirt. Make them count. Alessio, I can't. You can, he insisted, grasping my shoulders. You will. For the baby. For our future. Our future. The words hung between us, impossible and yet somehow inevitable. In the chaos of the last 12 hours, in the storm of violence and revelation, something had shifted between us, something neither of us had sought, but both now recognized. Heavy footsteps pounded up the spiral staircase. Alessio positioned himself in front of me, gun raised despite the blood still seeping from his wound. How long? I whispered. He checked his watch. 10 minutes. We need to hold them for 10 more minutes. The first attacker appeared in the doorway, a man in black tactical gear, his face obscured by a mask. Alessio fired, but his injury affected his aim, and the shot went wide. The man returned fire, forcing us back behind the metal console. Isabella, Alessio said, his voice tight with pain and urgency. If I don't make it, don't. I interrupted fiercely. Don't you dare say goodbye. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Not goodbye, a promise. If I don't make it, there's a safe house in Geneva. The codes are— More gunfire interrupted him as 2 more men burst into the room. Alessio returned fire, dropping one, but the other took cover behind the doorframe, firing methodically at our position. "We can't stay here," Alessio muttered, blood now soaking through his improvised bandage. "We're pinned down." I looked around desperately for an escape route, but there was nowhere to go. We were at the top of a tower, surrounded by enemies, with only the churning sea hundreds of feet below. A bullet struck the console inches from my head, sending sparks and metal fragments flying. One sliced across my cheek, and I felt warm blood trickle down my face. "Enough!" Alessio's roar was primal, filled with a rage I hadn't heard before. "Isabella, stay down!" Before I could stop him, he surged to his feet, firing repeatedly at the doorway, forcing the attacker to retreat momentarily. In that brief window, Alessio crossed to a cabinet I hadn't noticed before, wrenching it open to reveal what looked like explosives. "What are you doing?" I gasped. "Creating a distraction." He worked quickly despite his injury, attaching wires to the devices. "When I give the signal, run for the stairs. Don't look back, don't stop. Head for the boathouse on the eastern shore. There's a speedboat there with emergency supplies. I'm not leaving you." The declaration surprised me as much as him. His eyes met mine, something like wonder flickering in their depths. "Isabella." Whatever he was about to say was cut off by a new barrage of gunfire. This time Alessio wasn't fast enough. A bullet caught him in the leg, sending him crashing to his knees. "Alessio!" I scrambled to his side, heedless of the danger. "Get back!" he ordered, but I ignored him, dragging him behind the console as bullets tore through the space where he'd been seconds before. "You're hit again," I said unnecessarily, my hands shaking as I tried to assess the damage. "Just a flesh wound," he ground out, though the amount of blood suggested otherwise. "Stop lying to me," I snapped, tearing another strip from my blouse to bind his leg. "You can't even walk. How are we supposed to escape now?" "We have one chance." He pressed something into my hand, a small detonator. "When I tell you, press this button. The explosion will collapse the stairwell, but it will buy us time." "Time for what?" I demanded. "We're trapped here." The ghost of a smile touched his lips again. "Do you trust me, Isabella?" "No," I said automatically, then hesitated. "Maybe. I don't know." His blood-stained hand found mine, squeezing gently. "That's progress, at least." More footsteps on the stairs, more men coming to kill us. Alessio checked his watch. 7 minutes. We need to hold for 7 more minutes. Until what? As if in answer, a distant sound reached us, the distinctive thump of helicopter rotors. "Our extraction," Alessio said, fresh determination hardening his features. "Help me up." Together we staggered to the shattered windows. Through the driving rain, I could just make out a helicopter approaching from the mainland, flying dangerously low over the turbulent sea. "They'll never be able to land in this," I said, watching the aircraft battle the storm winds. "They don't need to land," Alessio replied. "Just get close enough for extraction." "Extraction?" I repeated numbly. "You mean a rope ladder?" he confirmed. "It's our only way out." Fear clutched at my throat. "I can't do that. I'm pregnant." "You can, and you will," Alessio said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "For the baby. For us." There it was again. That us that shouldn't exist, but somehow did. Forged in blood and fear, and the strange intimacy of shared danger. The gunfire had stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear men conferring in the stairwell, planning their next assault. "Get ready," Alessio whispered, positioning himself by the window, the detonator in one hand, his gun in the other. "When the helicopter arrives, I'll trigger the explosives. That's your window to get to the roof access hatch." He nodded toward a trapdoor in the ceiling I hadn't noticed before. "The extraction team will drop the ladder there." "What about you?" I asked, already knowing the answer. His eyes met mine, filled with a resignation that terrified me more than the bullets had. "I'll cover your escape." "No." The word was torn from me, surprising us both with its vehemence. "I'm not leaving you here to die, Isabella. No." I moved closer, grabbing his blood-stained shirt. "You promised to protect me and my baby. You can't do that if you're dead." Something shifted in his expression. surprise, then a fierce determination. "You're right," he said softly. "I made a promise." The helicopter was close now, fighting the winds to maintain position near the tower. A spotlight cut through the rain, illuminating the shattered observation room. "Now!" Alessio pressed the detonator. The explosion rocked the tower, sending tremors through the ancient stone. Screams echoed from the stairwell as it collapsed, taking Moretti's men with it. Alessio shoved me toward the trapdoor. "Go!" I climbed onto the console, pushing the trapdoor open against the howling wind and rain. The helicopter hovered impossibly close, a rope ladder already descending toward the roof. "I can't leave you," I shouted over the roar of the rotors, looking back at Alessio, who was pale with blood loss, but still standing, still fighting. "You're not," he replied, dragging himself toward me despite his injuries. "We go together." With the last of his strength, he boosted me through the trapdoor onto the rain-lashed roof. I turned immediately to help him, grabbing his arms and pulling with everything I had. Somehow, against all odds, we both made it onto the roof as the tower began to crumble beneath us. The ladder swung wildly in the wind, tantalizingly close but still out of reach. "Jump for it," Alessio shouted in my ear. "I'll be right behind you. Promise me," I demanded, rain and tears mingling on my face. "I promise," he said, and kissed me, a fierce, desperate kiss that tasted of blood and rain and impossible futures. "Now go." I leapt for the ladder, catching it with both hands, clinging desperately as it swung me out over the abyss. Looking back, I saw Alessio poised to jump, but at that moment, a figure appeared through the trapdoor, Antonio Moretti himself, his face contorted with hatred, a gun in his hand. "Alessio!" I screamed as Moretti fired. Alessio staggered but didn't fall. Instead, he turned with preternatural speed and fired his own weapon. Moretti crumpled, but not before getting off one more shot. This time, Alessio fell to his knees at the edge of the crumbling roof. "Jump!" I screamed, one hand outstretched toward him as the helicopter began to pull away, taking me with it. With what seemed like the last of his strength, Alessio lunged for the ladder, his fingers closing around the lowest rung as the helicopter veered away from the collapsing tower. We dangled there, suspended between earth and sky, as the fortress that had been both prison and sanctuary exploded in flames below us. Alessio hung by one hand, his body a dead weight, blood streaming from his wounds. "Hold on." I climbed down the ladder toward him, ignoring the danger, caring only that he not fall. His eyes met mine, filled with a wonder that transcended pain. "You came back for me," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Always," I replied, the word a vow I hadn't known I was ready to make until it left my lips. Together, we clung to the ladder as the helicopter carried us away from the burning island, away from death and destruction, toward an uncertain future that somehow, against all reason, we would face together. In the shelter of a trauma blanket aboard the helicopter, as medics worked to stabilize Alessio's wounds, he pulled me close, his lips against my ear. "This is only the beginning, Isabella," he murmured. "From this moment, you and the child are under my protection. Not as prisoners, not as possessions, but as family. My family." I should have protested, should have reminded him that I hadn't agreed to his terms, that one moment of crisis didn't erase the fact that he'd kidnapped me, threatened me, drawn me into his dangerous world. Instead, I found myself leaning into his embrace, my hand covering his where it rested protectively over my stomach. The baby that had been Marco's mistake was now Alessio's heir, claimed not through blood, but through choice, through a promise forged in fire and sealed with blood. "Family," I echoed, the word both terrifying and exhilarating. Alessio's smile was like the breaking of dawn after the longest night. "I'll build you a new fortress, Kara. One where no one can reach you. One where you'll both be safe." As the helicopter carried us toward the distant lights of the mainland, I knew that I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The life I had known was gone, consumed in the same flames that had devoured Alessio's island fortress. In its place was something new and dangerous and strangely beautiful. A future with a man who had claimed me through a misdirected text, who had bled for me, who looked at my unborn child not as a burden, but as a treasure to be protected at all costs. It wasn't love, not yet. But as Alessio's hand tightened around mine, as his eyes promised me a world where I would never again walk alone in the rain, I knew it could be. Someday, it could.